Hey, welcome to Sipping Tea with Sabrina. And in a second, we'll be sharing the tea on project management for nonprofits. But if you've never met me before, I'm Sabrina, the Dream Team Architect and President and CEO of Building Better Boards. I specialize in building elite leadership teams for corporate and nonprofit boards and CEOs, turning high-level potential into extraordinary performance. And if you're looking to transform your board or need support working with your board or team, you come to the right place. Again, I'm Sabrina. I facilitate for corporate and nonprofit organizations, international keynote speaker, and your go-to expert in strategic leadership and governing excellence. I've helped drive $14 million in revenue. That's one project, y'all, while building organizational resilience. And I'm here to share the insights and strategies that can make a real difference for you and your organization. So let's start. We have with us today. So before I get started, I have to kind of look down, and it seems so like, my God, what is she doing? Well, what I'm doing is making sure that you're able to see this across all the platforms this is happening at right now. So if you allow me a moment to do that, it's a little bit better than trying to discreetly look down and having you wonder, what is she doing? So that's what I'm doing. Give me the opportunity to do that, because the tech is teching today. And I don't know if I have it in me to just make it seem discreet today. It's one of those days, y'all. So let's do this. Let me make sure that I share this across all the platforms that's needed. And then we'll get started from here, because I want us to be able to focus on what is happening today, because this is going to be a great conversation, because this is one that I kind of struggle with, right? So we're going to bring to the stage an expert in this area, and I want her to be able to come on and introduce herself, and because you're in the right place if you want to understand what project management is for nonprofits, and whether you're a mission-driven company or association or your nonprofit can benefit from this critical conversation. And that's why we have Cari with us today. So Cari, first, before we even get started with you sharing with the people a little bit about yourself, I just want to say thank you for the grace. The tech is teching today. It has been one of those days, and you have been so gracious and patient with me. So with that in mind, I want to extend you grace as well, and share with the people a little bit about yourself, Cari.
Thanks, Sabrina. Hi, everyone. Sabrina, it's really good to see you again.
Yes.
So thanks for inviting me on. I'm really excited to be here. I'm excited to hear what other people have to share or questions they have. So I'm Cari Kozicki. I'm the owner of CK Project Management Consulting. I am a certified project management professional. I spent the last 9 years in public media, and before that, a decade and a half in international travel and the mobile cell phone space. So I launched my consulting business last fall, seeing a real need for project management, not only in public media, but other industries. During the pandemic, I was doing statewide cross-partner educational impact work, and that broader industry work was really feeding my soul. So launching my own business allows me the opportunity to help other organizations, not just one organization. And so I really love that. I'm currently located in northeastern Pennsylvania, about 40 minutes from Allentown. So people have an idea where I am.
Here in Allentown. You're near Lehigh Valley.
That's correct. Yes. So my strength is what I call bringing organizations' ideas to fruition. So I'm the person who bridges the gap between imagination and reality. So the way I like to have people visualize it is I'm the person who sits alongside the leader. I work with them. I work with their teams to bring whatever vision, project, event, program, or community idea to life. So you can see it, touch it, breathe it, right? That sort of thing. And I've been finding over the years that my values really do guide my work. So for me, I actually prioritize competency, flexibility, fun, and I'm definitely human centered. There's a human behind every interaction, and I always try to remember that. And as a leader, I prioritize accountability. I love collaboration and an adaptive approach to problem solving. So I actually call myself a solution based thinker. So that bleeds into everything that I do as well. So thanks.
Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you for being here. I and people know who listen to this. I have a format where I ask questions and I try to send them to you so you're prepared. But it's one question that's not on here that I want to start off with, and I know you can answer because this is your area of expertise. For those who heard of the concept of project management but never actually knew what project management was or is and how it can benefit them, can you share a little bit about that first?
I can. I think the best way I could have somebody visualize it is it's planning. So, and honestly, everyone probably does project management and they don't realize it, right? So let's imagine, because I spent some time in international travel, you're going on a trip, right? So let's say you want to go to Italy. You're not just going to suddenly appear in Italy, right? You're like, when am I going? Do I need to request time off? Am I going with someone else? Am I getting there by a plane? Am I doing a layover? Do I need to rent a car when I get there? What is my accommodation going to be looking like? How am I going to be keeping in touch with people when I'm there? Do I have work I need to do? What are the major sites or things that I want to see or experience? So you're going to be doing some of that up front. You don't have to do everything because some people like to be less structured, and that's absolutely okay. But you're definitely going to need to plan the big things, right? You're going to need to plan how you're going to get over there, your accommodation and your meals, right? Everything else can be a bit more flexible. I think that's the best way I could illustrate what project management is. And it allows you to anticipate things that could come up along the way if you do some of that planning up front. And it's going to make whatever you're doing more enjoyable. And you probably had some goals of what you wanted to achieve when you were there. So it's going to allow you to meet those goals. So I hope that little bit of helped. May help.
Yeah, that helped. I just wanted to set the tone for the conversation. And I want to say welcome to Connie. I like calling people names when they join the stage. So welcome, Connie. So here's my first official question. Don't hold the other one against me. I just wanted to set the stage, right? So nonprofits operate with limited resources. And when you talk project management, sometimes a lot of different tools come up, but also a lot of different expenses for some people come up. But what are some low-cost project management tools or techniques that you recommend?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one that is always at top of mind for nonprofits or other areas where resources may be a bit constrained. So my first recommendation is don't reinvent the wheel, right? Don't force a piece of technology if you don't need it. So if your organization uses spreadsheets, no problem. If you use PowerPoint for progress updates, no problem, right? I say use what works for you and your team. Otherwise, they will not use a tool that you implement if they don't know how to use it, if it's a burden, if it costs money that perhaps could be better spent somewhere else. And then that becomes its own issue. The tool is only as good as what you can put into it. It's really how people work together that matters. So that's my first thing. I also would suggest many templates already exist for free online in your own organization. You probably have templates, so find them, create them, build your toolkit so you're not creating these every time you have a project or initiative. If there are regular similar projects that you're doing, build a toolkit for that so that you're not building new every time. It will save you time, effort, and money, and you'll have consistency, which is really key. And then my third suggestion would be use AI to help you whenever you can. Trust me, if you're not using it, I guarantee you your competitors are. So, I mean, it's everywhere. It's ChatGPT, social media, search engines. I mean, now when you go to any of those places, AI is prompting you right there. Use them, take advantage of that. I will also say there are many sources of information about how to use AI effectively. You know, it really matters what prompts you give AI to get the best results.
Right.
So there are tools on how to use that for areas of discipline like sales or fundraising or marketing. There's a person I follow on LinkedIn. His name's called Paul Storm, and he has what he calls the Digital Storm Weekly Newsletter. And he provides a whole host of AI tools, usually for free. You know, if you need video, if you need images, if you need text. And also he will evaluate some of them. So you don't have to do that on your own. And there's also free courses in AI from Google or MIT or places like that. So you can take advantage of that. I do want to make a note because AI can make people nervous. AI does not supplant your work.
No.
For you or your teams, right? Humans need to be checking AI results. It's not meant to give you a result and then you turn that in verbatim. It's meant to spur ideas, scan quick resources for you, right? But it's the human piece. You still need that. So those are some tools and techniques I would recommend.
Thank you for saying that, because I work with a couple of people that are sitting in that nonprofit CEO seat, and they're not using AI. And I'm like, why are you not doing that? It's such a great tool that will cut down on so much time that you're dedicating to trying to figure out how to word that email, or what do I say in response to this board member, or how do I manage this project, X, Y, and Z. So thank you for endorsing that. I don't quite know what the hurdle is for a lot of people sitting in that seat. But I guess here's one thing, Cari, the AI moves so fast and they're always so engrossed in the work that they don't look up to learn about these different tools, and it's moving really fast. And so maybe that's one of the problems. But here's the thing. After I welcome Yvonne to the stage, I want to make sure I welcome Yvonne to the stage. So welcome, Yvonne. Here's the thing. How can nonprofit leaders, right? Because everything is about leadership, but how can nonprofit leaders effectively prioritize projects when everything seems to be urgent and important?
Great question. And I visualize the sort of 4 quadrants that we've probably all seen: urgent, important. So everything sort of seems to fall in the top left square. And I can appreciate that. What I would suggest is the first thing is, please don't prioritize in a vacuum, right? Lean on input and realities from your leadership team and or your full team. You will not see everything if you're looking at it solo. I guarantee that. Working with others is going to help you identify what is actually urgent and important. So don't prioritize in a vacuum. I would also suggest always asking yourself, does the project match your organizational goals or your annual goals? Do they help you with your mission? Do they help you serve the community need that your organization is meant to serve? So calling out those distractions that you think are urgent and important when you look through this lens is going to be really helpful, because you will find that some of them won't meet those criteria, and it's going to be really hard to say no, but it's in your best interest, in your organization's best interest, in your community that you serve best interest to say no to those. Another thing I would recommend to prioritize projects when everything seems urgent and important is take a look at capacity, right? So can your organization actually take on this work? Is it a large funding opportunity that allows you to serve your community or meet your mission? So that's another thing to look at. There are some where you just say, I don't have the capacity right now to do that. And if you want to make capacity for something, you probably need to let something else go. So that's a really difficult process to do, but it can be done. So capacity is another one. And then I would also suggest, once you then have what's urgent and important, delegate it, right? You've hired a team around you. Step out of the way and let them lead, let them do what you hired them to do, so that you can then focus on leading the organization.
Yeah. you got a couple points there. One is I want to go back and just say this. You said something that took me years to learn after working in my organization for 20 years and leading it for 20 years. I think the 5 years before I retired, I finally realized that I need to say no to certain things. You talked about capacity, right? And I started adopting this mantra. Now it took years to going to Harvard Business School for nonprofit service, all that, to realize sometimes you need to do less to do more. And
Absolutely.
So to your point, you've got to, everything is not urgent and important, and you have a team around you, and sometimes you have to do less to do more. And don't be afraid to say no based on your capacity. And it's okay. Cari, I know I'm going down a rabbit hole here, but I feel like something's happening. How do you, I have this person that I'm working with too as well, and they are doing things because that's the way they've always done it, and having all these community events, not because it necessarily serves the organization or the community, but because the organization has always done it and they've been around for 30 years. How, when you talk about urgent and important and prioritizing and all the great examples you just gave, how do you get through the noise, or not the noise? How do you get through that behavior, or this is the way we've always done it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. There has to be an appetite to look at, is the way we've always done it the right way to move forward? One of the things that, if you can habituate this, if you can habituate looking at it through these different lenses, it's going to get easier. So a lot of times if you've been in business for 30 years and this is the way you've always done it, it's because those things have now been habituated, right? You don't even have to think about it. It's just what you do. But so first you need that aptitude, but then you also need to habituate something new. And if that something new is constantly looking at capacity, constantly looking at it through the lens of, does it meet your mission and your organizational goals, constantly not prioritizing in a vacuum, then that becomes your new, this is the way we do it, right? And that allows a bit more flexibility. If a leader is not ready to look at it differently, you've got to give them space to get there, right? You won't be able to force them, or it will be a long, hard slog for you. Right. And I think just frustration for them. So some of it is, just the realization has to be there. And I would encourage that other leaders, I think everyone has other mentors. So hopefully they're seeking out constructive feedback from some of their mentors that might allow them to get to that space where they have, the ability to now shift gears.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then you also said something that made me smile a little bit. It was around, you said, delegate to staff and do that. So that leads me to this next question. When you maybe don't have staff, some people don't. So what strategies do you suggest for managing projects that rely heavily on volunteer labor?
Yes. So first off, start building your volunteer base early if you can. Don't wait until the project is right on top of you. I think it's also helpful if you can designate someone on your team to lead the volunteer program. So that ensures that the right time and attention are paid to it in advance. So again, this is the planning piece, right? I'd also recommend reaching out to organizations that already have established volunteer labor relationships ready. So in the Lehigh Valley, there's the Volunteer Center of the Lehigh Valley that we have to lean on. Look at your partner organizations. So many staff at partner orgs want to volunteer in their community. So you often find a good base in that space. AARP organizations also have volunteer labor and they can guarantee hours. So you'll have some consistency if you're looking at organizations that already provide volunteers to the community. And then 3, I would say, have a plan in place. I know that takes time and everyone wants to have that ready now. But if you spend the time to do the planning, it will be well worth it. So I'd suggest developing standard operating procedures or standard practices of how you train and treat your volunteers. One of the often heard things when people are working with volunteers is, they're just volunteering here for a couple hours. They're not really understanding our mission. They can't speak intelligently about what we do. And I say, if they're an extension of you and they're representing you or your organization, do them the honor of treating them that way. They're smart, they're kind, they do care about your organization's mission. So make sure you give them the tools and the information and the training so that they can be effective and represent your organization when they're out in public.
Yeah.
So it's really a reflection of you investing in them as to how they behave and can perform in the community.
That's such great advice, and you made me smile again because I also use AARP volunteers. They're great people who have a lot of skill sets who want to give back. So thank you for reminding me of that.
Mm-hmm.
So how can nonprofits balance the need for structured project management with the flexibility required in mission-driven work?
Yeah, and remember when I provided the anecdote of your booking your travel to Italy, and you've got to have some basics, and then the rest can be flexible depending on your level of adventure, I would call it. So there are some non-negotiables, I would say. At a minimum, I recommend a few things would have to be in place, what I'll call part of the structured side, right? So you definitely have to set SMART goals. Please don't undertake anything without having goals. I see that often. Can't go on gut feelings, right? What's your purpose? Why are you doing this? What's it serving? Also, check your work against your core mission and your annual goals, right? Does it serve that purpose? If not, should you be doing it? We talked a little bit about that earlier. At a minimum, I would suggest having a team charter. It doesn't have to be called that, but for the group that's doing the work. So what are their norms? How do they resolve conflict? How do they need to record and report progress? What authority levels do they actually have to make decisions? So your work team should actually know what they have authority to do or say yes to, and where they have to check in with leadership or somebody else. So the fourth piece of that, kind of a basic that you can't, I think, skirt around, is ensure that you can measure the impact and that it's built into your planning. So for me, those are almost the non-negotiables. If you've got those basics in place, that's your structure. Then the unstructured or flexible parts, I think, just vary based on the project you're working on, what your organization norms look like, and the ability of your teams. And I'd also say don't fall victim to comparison. So remember, what works for you and your organization might not work for another organization. And that's okay. Just because an organization over here is doing it this way and that doesn't work for you, just focus on your mission. Focus on doing what you do and how you serve the community. And I guarantee you're going to shine.
Yeah, I'm smiling quite often when you say certain words like SMART goals and pause and plan, because these are the things that I truly, truly believe that will make your organization so much more sustainable in the long run.
True.
And I feel like a lot of times, nonprofits don't take the time to do the goals, to do the project management. They're working from the hip on with passion. And yes, passion is a component, but passion can burn out really fast.
Yeah,
and if you don't do what you're suggesting around project management and having those goals and pausing and asking the questions and having the SOPs and doing all of those things, you will not live up to your full potential as an organization. And so I just want people to hear that. So if you're just joining us, welcome to the broadcast. And we're currently talking about project management for nonprofits. Now, we've covered various topics, but I think Yvonne in the chat is just covering it very well. So I'm going to read some of her comments. Yvonne is like, I like that. Sometimes you have to do less to do more. Yes, I have volunteered before. And sometimes you are not you let in because they see you as a volunteer. So if you want to know what that is in direct response to, I am going to suggest that you go back and you listen to what Miss Cari is saying in this broadcast here, because it is going well and the points are hitting. So with that in mind, Miss Cari, I got a couple of more questions for you.
Sure.
So what are some of the common project management mistakes that you
Mhm.
see in the nonprofit sector, and how can they be avoided?
I would actually say this is not just for the nonprofit sector. I see this in any sector. To be honest, the first thing I always see is everyone just wants to dive right into the work without making time for planning. So I often hear from leadership, really, but every level of the organization, "Oh, I don't have 2 or 3 hours to spend on this meeting. Can it just be an email? Can it be 15 minutes?" And the way that I like to look at planning is I like to annualize it and match it to the benefit.
Mhm.
So, for example, is spending 2 or 3 hours of planning for a project or a grant that's worth 50,000 or 100,000? Isn't that well worth your time? To be honest, I'd probably say 2 or 3 hours is not enough. So I like to have people look at it from that lens because that gives them a different take on it.
Right.
And I really do think if you make that time commitment up front to do the planning, you're going to be more flexible. You're going to be more proactive. You're going to be able to navigate risks. You're going to be more successful. It just is. That has been proven by experience. So wanting to dive right in without the planning is catch yourself there because the fun stuff is when you're diving right in.
Right.
The planning is going to make that dive more fun though for you.
Yeah.
Another mistake that I see, I think a lot of organizations or persons think that project management software automatically solves the problem or does the work for you. So project management is about people working together as a team to solve a goal, to meet a need, to bring something to an audience that's useful. And so
Mhm.
the software or tool I find is really only as good as what you put in, right? The key is how do your teams work together? How do they communicate? How do they plan? How do they support each other? How do they manage obstacles? How do they problem solve? And so I actually encourage nonprofits to spend their time there, foster how your teams work together.
Mhm.
That's going to impact your success.
Yes.
Then the tool that you may bring in to help you is much easier. It's going to be adopted, that sort of thing. So please don't think a tool is going to solve everything for you. Another mistake is failing to set goals or confirming how to measure impact.
Yep.
Anecdotal is not enough in many cases. It's helpful and it's supporting, um, but it's not enough. And going with your gut or what you think people are going to want out of it, it's not enough. Then you're not truly serving your community. So take that time to do that up front, set goals, and confirm how you can measure impact. And we'll talk about, I think there's a question a little bit later on about measuring impact
Mhm.
without overburdening your staff. So we'll talk
Right.
about that a little bit more. And
Right.
then I also find another mistake, and it's so difficult to do when you have a shortage of staff, but organizations typically overload the usual handful of people who get
Yep.
stuff done,
Mhm.
right? But I think if you make the time to plan, you're going to find others in your organization that have capacity and the skill set. So don't overlook them. Don't always go to the handful of people because they're already busy and they
Right.
may be at capacity, but not understand how to share that with you.
Yeah.
And if you're going after funding, I think, and you don't have the roles internally to support that funding, if you receive it, build that cost into the ask, right? If
Thank
you need
you.
someone to properly manage a grant or a funded project, um, I find it's really not often done well when it's a third role added on to somebody who's already doing 2 full-time roles, right?
Thank
It
you.
just will not hit the mark. So those are some of the common, I wouldn't call them mistakes, almost like pitfalls. It's just sort of
Right.
a natural thing to fall into there. So just some proactive thinking can help.
You are speaking my language, my friend. I just, I'm just sitting here going, yep, yeah, what she said is so good because these are the things that we don't think about, especially, people always want, and the next question is around grants, people always
Mhm.
want these grants, but I'm like, be careful what you ask for because a good grant writer can get you the grant, but if you're just going out there willy-nilly, writing a grant and not doing the pre-meetings like you said and not understanding your staff is already overwhelmed and y'all are not having these conversations, you can go out here and create these grants and there's no one that can execute it, and now you're just overwhelming everybody. So what you're saying is gospel, and I just want people to hear it, because what I know about folks in this industry again is we're very passionate, but we don't like the other P word, which is planning. So we just don't like it. We gravitate towards the passion, but not the planning. So speaking of grants, and thank you for talking about that, how can nonprofits effectively manage multi-year grant-funded projects to ensure they meet both the funder requirements and the organizational goals?
Yeah, really important to cover this one. I have half a dozen considerations I would offer. So the first one is, I think, make sure you have set your organization goals before you actually go after your funding. So you're going after the right ones that serve what you're doing. Right?
I'm sorry. That's a good one right there. We're just not going after the money for the sake of the money. We're going after it because we have some goals. That's a good.
And sometimes that happens because money can be attractive from a funder, but if it's not serving your purpose, that's the hard part. You may have to say no, right? So seeking funding that aligns with your organizational goals. So we know you can't be all things to all people, right? So nonprofits typically have a niche in the community that they serve. So make sure you're going after the funding that fits, or what you're going to find is it's going to be difficult to meet the grant requirements, and particularly multi-year ones. You won't be able to sustain that. Definitely read the funder requirements and revisit them often so they're top of mind, and you're always ensuring that your project's aligning with what they're asking for. That's a living, breathing thing. Don't read it once and set it aside. Make sure that you're always looking at it through that lens. I think also appointing a grant or project lead is going to ensure success. We talked about how you could fund one of those positions if you don't have it internally. Someone who's coordinating at the top level across the entirety of the grant is going to be helpful. If no one's looking after it, it's going to fail, right? If no one's leading it, no one's nurturing it, it won't be as successful. Also think if funder requirements change or your organizational goals change at any time during a multi-year grant, look at the grant requirements carefully. That should be the first thing that you're taking a look at. I would recommend being open and honest with your funders. Oftentimes you have a relationship with your funders, so hopefully you've been cultivating that. But if you encounter an issue, be honest with them. They can often help work with you to resolve it. If you try to, what I say, shove it under the rug, it's not going to be helpful, and it may guarantee actually that you don't receive another grant from that particular funder. So you've got to look at the bigger picture. And I would also recommend, if you don't have in-house grant writing or a grant writing manager, find someone who specializes in that. Your success rate is absolutely going to be higher than hoping that someone on your team knows enough to do the job.
Right. Yeah. That
invest in that.
Great advice. The other thing that I want to acknowledge and do a nod to is that you're not talking about, oh, you got to get this software and do this and do that. You're like, no, focus on the team. But because when people start talking, I don't want to call names, but there's a certain softwares, project management softwares that just make my head hurt.
Sure.
But when you have a remote team, because some people, I was working with the organization, and like their board members are like all over the United States, and I think even one is international. And I know some staff that are like that too. What techniques do you recommend for keeping that remote or distributed teams aligned and productive on nonprofit projects?
Yeah, and actually, I've had the benefit here of most of my career was working with distributed teams. Certainly in my days before public media as well. Offices in other countries, and my managers were actually in other countries, and our partners were in other countries. So what I found has been helpful, and I think some of these skills probably came to the forefront for people during the pandemic, right? Because many people were working more distributed than they normally would. But the first thing is set regular check-ins. You have to make sure that the teams are talking regularly. Weekly? Is it bi-weekly? In some cases, it might be daily for projects. That doesn't have to be hours. It can be 15-minute stand-up, quick check-in. The team should really start establishing norms or setting up a team charter for the project. We talked a little bit about that, like that has to be a structure in some way that you put in place so that they can talk about how to resolve conflict, what are the rules of the team, how do they work together remotely.
Right.
Because keep in mind, everybody in that space is remote. So if you've got 8 people on a call, they're all remote to each other as well.
Right.
So they are going to have their own norms of how they want to work together remotely, right? So you've got to give them that space to do that. I think during those regular check-ins, I would recommend having a standard agenda item on alignment to project goals so that the teams are talking about it regularly. Because when you're not able to just pop into the office next door or the next building over, you've got to be intentional about having that as a standard agenda item. Again, I think then it allows them to habituate their actions toward alignment, right? Consistency. And then if they run into an issue, it's known quickly and they can address it as a team. So that's key. I would also recommend give them the tools and technology so that they can do remote work. So ensure they have easy access to the documents or materials they need, whether that's Teams or Office 365, Zoom, SharePoint, Dropbox. How do they manage sensitive files? For a lot of industries, sensitive files are critical as well. So take the time to make sure they have the tools to be able to do the work remotely. And if you're not sure of the tools, ask them. They will tell you, right?
Yeah.
And I would suggest, depending on project length, celebrating milestones or get-togethers can help build a sense of team, even if it's a little get-together on a Zoom, right? Get together and celebrate the good work or whatever milestone they've achieved, or have something a little bit fun. I've actually seen people do karaoke on Zoom, right? So just something to bring a little bit of that human-centered touch to it are some recommendations for me.
Those are great recommendations, and thank you for sharing those, and thank you for not delving. You mentioned some tech tools, but you didn't go down the tech rabbit hole, so I want to thank you for that. So how can nonprofits incorporate impact measurement into their project management process without overburdening staff? I know we alluded to that. Now I want to make sure that we get into that, because we know we work in an industry where people are often overwhelmed, overworked, overburdened.
Yeah. And burnout is real.
Yes.
Certainly, I think more so in the last 5 years, burnout is real. So be sure, and burnout in leadership is real. So be sure you're checking on yourself. The first thing I recommend is checking and understanding what impact measures the grant or the funded project requires. So don't create something that's not asked for, right?
Oh,
don't get fancy with the spices if you don't need to. Look at what the grant is actually asking you to provide.
Took me a long time to learn that lesson, my friend. Long time.
And then after that, ensure it's a measurement that you're capable of collecting or achieving. Are there data points or impact measurements that your organization or your team is already regularly collecting, right? That could actually be used. Could technology help you achieve the impact measurement, like a survey, for example? Do other data points already exist in the broader nonprofit ecosystem you could tap into? So for me, I think of the United Way. Has a lot of good resource. Pew, P-E-W, Pew Research, a lot of good data. There might be some local entities in your own communities that actually gather data about, the community or industries or situations that you serve. Seek those out, so then the data is already there. Use that. Right. It's vetted. I also suggest looking at if other organizations have done something similar, where you could ask them how they collected data or measured impact. Maybe they found a way that was a bit more streamlined than you're able to find, and you could lean on that. And then I would also suggest, this is so important, don't leave it until the end. Plan and talk about how you're going to measure impact at the start. This is actually going to ensure that your staff has ample time to work on it, and they're not 2 weeks before everything's due trying to figure this out, because that's going to be noticeable and you're not going to be as successful as you could. And your grant funder is going to notice that.
Yep. You have I used to say the dirty F word. Well, I'm going to say the dirty P word, because planning. That is, I've heard you repeat it several times, and that's what this is. We have to be proactive in our planning and in our approach. So I'm going to check and see if we have any questions. Got to look across a couple of platforms, but if you have a question, I want to give you time to type that question around this. And one of the common questions that I get all the time is, Sabrina, can you help me with engaging my board in fundraising? And of course, the answer is yes. And so the next step is for you to visit my website at www.buildingbetterboards.com to check out my services. And if you're watching this on rebroadcast, post your question in the comments and we'll get back with you. Look, I'm not going to get back with you on the project management. That's not my expertise, but I will make sure that Cari sees your question and she will get back with you. I am, I am a work in progress. And I know that I have acknowledged this throughout this conversation. I have sat here and nodded my head with all the avoid these pitfalls and these mistakes. And I want to thank you for sharing that with our audience today. So Yvonne said, yes, necessary to make my life easier with volunteering for NGO. Okay, are there, it's not a question, but I think it's a statement that she said that may be a question for others. Are there any tools that can make life easier for volunteers when they are volunteering for a nonprofit organization that you would recommend?
That's a good question. I struggle with answering this because I'm not sure what necessary tools means. Is it necessary tools for them to do the volunteer job that they're going to do? Is it tools for them to look for volunteer opportunities?
Got it.
I want to make sure I'm understanding the question properly.
Yeah, I think it was when we were talking about the different tools of onboarding volunteers. So making sure like volunteers are a part of the team and they know what's going on. And so, yes, I have volunteered before, and sometimes you're not let in because they see you as a volunteer. And so if you are not let in or need to be let in, and you've never dealt with volunteers before or have a large volunteer, what tools would you suggest, I guess, to ease that process of letting them?
I mean, hopefully if you have an ally somewhere where you're volunteering, or you may want to consider, is that the right volunteer spot for you? If you've got an ally there, I just ask the key questions. You know, if it's as basic as, what is the event? What things do you want me talking about or promoting so that I'm representing us truly? And can you give me those? Because oftentimes there will be talking points, or they'll have some things that you want to share. So if you're not being let in, you could kind of stick your toe in, I think, that way. Okay. If you still think it's the right volunteer space for you. Obviously do research on the web, check out their social media. If you're not getting answers from people at the place that you want to volunteer at, definitely do that. In terms of, I guess, tools for sharing information with volunteers, it's probably going to be what your organization is using. There are, and forgive me because I'm not a volunteer manager, there are volunteer management tools and software pieces where I am sure you can input key things like your mission, your vision, how you serve the community. Here's, information that we want you to be presenting when you're out at an event representing us. There are those tools that exist, but you'd have to talk to somebody who is a volunteer manager or works with that on a daily. Yeah. I hope that helps a little bit. I hope I've gotten to Yvonne's question there.
Yeah, I think so. And I know that Bloomerang actually has a volunteer management component to their software as well. So if that's something that people are interested in, they can look into that. Now, I promise, at this time, I've checked the platforms. I want to thank you for answering that question. How could people find you?
Yeah, great
Share.
question.
I want to know how people can find you, how they can contact you if they're interested in pausing and planning, and any final words that you have.
Yeah, thank you. The easiest way to find me is going to my website at ckpmp.com. So that's Charlie Kitten Paul Mary Paul.com. And you can drop me a note there. My cell phone is listed there. My LinkedIn profile you can jump into. I'd be happy to hear from you. And if you've got any questions too, I'd be happy to help answer them. So I don't want people to struggle. I want to be an extension and a resource for you. So please reach out.
That makes sense to me. Any final words, especially when you're dealing with folk who are passionate, but the pause and plan is not on our radar sometimes. Any final departing words that you'd like to say?
Well, I think we don't give ourselves enough credit. I think we all have that capability to pause and plan. I would never want to squelch anyone's passion.
Mm-hmm.
I would offer, if you've got passion, that means there's more in you. And so with a little bit of planning, that passion can even be better directed to your mission and what you're trying to achieve. So I think don't be so hard on yourself. I offered some solutions, some suggestions. They might not work for you and they might not work for everyone, and that's okay. And you might have your own solutions or suggestions. So, just trust yourself, be confident, and don't lose your passion, even if someone says, hey, did you consider it this way?
That's a good answer. So thank you so much. Thank you, Cari, for being here. I think that project management is one of those things that we all need. And you made it you humanized it, and gave people permission to grow. You don't have to be perfect, but you have to start the process. So I want to thank you for doing that and bringing that to our stage. And I also just want to make sure that people know that I will be dropping your contact information across all the platforms, so that they can reach out to you to continue this conversation, to get any information that they may need. And I want to say that is Sipping Tea with Sabrina, and I'll see you guys the next time. Thank you so very much, Cari, for being here. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.